Hey, what's up, YouTubers? It's me again, Brian, aka Gamer55551, and I am back with a video review. And for this review, we're going to be taking a look at Onimusha Warlords for the Nintendo Switch, also available on the PS4, Xbox One, and PC and Steam, but we'll be focusing on the Switch version. And originally the game was released back on the PlayStation 2 back in 2001, and of course the original Xbox. And in case you're curious though, this is the Japanese version, and if you're wondering why I have the Japanese version of this one, I'll explain that one probably a little bit later in the video. Plus, yeah, I'll probably explain this one as well at the end of the video why I have the Japanese version though. Onimusha, the first one though, was a personal favorite of mine. I remember reading about it back in an old issue of Game Informer back in 2001 during my senior year in high school though, and I thought the game looked very fascinating and interesting. A lot of people refer to it as Resident Evil with samurai, and there is some truth to that though. And it's a type of game that I played a lot on the original PlayStation 2, and it was a fun game. Of course, we had other entries like Onimusha 2 Samurai Destiny, Onimusha 3 Demon Siege, which for some reason which took place between the past and present, and for some reason in the present it took place in Paris, France, which was kind of odd. And I thought it was like they just randomly pulled a city out of a hat or something like that. And then of course we had Onimusha Dawns of Dream, and the two spin-offs, Onimusha, I think one was like a Smash Brothers, I never got a chance to play it, and Onimusha Tactics for, I think the Game Boy Advance. It spawned 4 entries though, and then by the time the PS2 era came to an end, the series simply just, well, disappeared. I mean, the characters made brief appearance I think one of the characters made an appearance in the Wii Fighter exclusive Takanoba vs. Capcom, but other than that, the series has kind of been dormant though, like other popular Capcom series, or like other series from Capcom as well, like whether it's Dino Crisis or Strider, which later got an entry on the PS3 and 360. So it was kind of interesting to see Capcom going back and reviving this classic PS2 game and bringing it towards the modern age. Not to mention the fact it was kind of interesting to hear that it was coming to the Nintendo Switch as well. Well, I got a chance to play the game, and despite me having to readjust to the control schemes that were okay back in the late 90s and early 2000s, might be difficult for some people though, it is still a fun and classic PS2 game. It's still a classic PS2 game. It was fun then, and it's still fun now. So why don't we get started with the pros and cons, and we'll start off with the pros. The first one I want to talk about is the gameplay. The gameplay, I will say, the structure of the game is very similar to basically what Resident Evil was back in the 90s or the late 90s and so forth. The game runs as a pre-rendered background, although pre-rendered backgrounds look a lot better than they did, obviously better than what they looked like in the PS1 and N64 era. But the difference is, unlike games like Resident Evil or Dino Crisis, which is more of a survival horror, this one's purely an action title. Basically, you defeat enemies with different kinds of weapons, and when you defeat them, they'll drop souls. You use some of those souls. Some of them are used to power up your weapons. Others are used to power up certain orbs that you need to unlock certain doors in the game. Other souls will power up your special meter that you can use to activate your weapon's special move, to some that will recharge your energy and so forth. And I will say that out of the 3 games, at least I know that Capcom has done, that use the pre-rendered backgrounds, Dino Crisis, Resident Evil series, and Onimusha, I have to say I enjoy Onimusha's more than I did with the other ones. Not that the other ones are bad, but I just like this one. Maybe because I like the hack and slash and the action title to it more than the other ones did. So in terms of gameplay, it's fun. Plus also there's the puzzles that definitely give off a Resident Evil vibe. And as I said earlier, think Resident Evil but with samurais in a way. Next thing I want to talk about is the story. And I will say it's interesting and I do enjoy it. Now, the story is kind of interesting because it takes an event that did happen in Japan though and kind of throws in the whole demons and all that stuff just for the heck of it in a way. And it is very interesting seeing like the whole like little bit of the lore of a little bit of the Japanese lores with all the demons and the gods and all that stuff. So from a story perspective, it's very interesting though. I'm not huge in the whole Japanese folklore, but I definitely did enjoy the story in this game. And finally, last but not least, although the visuals may not be at the level of, say, like what the Resident Evil 2 remake is, which I would have loved to see this game use the Resident Evil engine, the game still looks good. Even for a game that was released all the way back in 2001. Visually, this game still looks nice. It's more like a clean-up version of like the pre-rendered backgrounds that were used in games like Dino Crisis and the Resident Evil game back during the PlayStation 1 era, though. So visually, I mean, the game still looks good, and it's still fun even after all these years. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll get to part 2 of the cons. So we'll take a little break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 2 of our review of Onimusha Warlords for the Nintendo Switch. So now that I gave you the pros, why don't I give you the cons? And we'll start with the first con. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I still think the gameplay is fun and the game is still looking good, even for a game released all the way back in 2001. And I still stand behind that. That said, for those, especially for those who may not have been around during the late 90s or early 2000s, the visuals and the controls are going to be viewed as outdated, and I can understand why. The game, like I said earlier, runs like how the old Resident Evil games do. It runs with pre-rendered backgrounds, and it uses basically what would be often referred to as tank controls. So moving the character may not be as solid as, say, if you were playing something like, say, the Resident Evil 2 remake or any other 3D any other 3D game, action game to be exact. So the controls are going to be outdated and the visuals are not going to look as impressive as they were probably back in 2001. For some though, to me it doesn't bother me as much, but there are those that may view this game as being outdated to be exact. The next thing I want to talk about is the music, and I do want to say that while I don't hate the music in this game, I am a little disappointed that the original score is not in this version of Onimusha, that it's not in here though, compared to the original one released back in the days of the Xbox and the PlayStation 2. And from what I understand, at least according to an article from Eurogamer and what I looked up, it appears to be the original composer was, if I'm saying this correctly, and I'll have a link in the description, you could check it, read the article yourself and come to your conclusion, is that apparently he did not made the original score, that it was sort of composed by a ghost composer or something like that, and that sort of created a controversy, and that might have been the reason why the original score is not in this version of Onimusha Warlords, which is a bit unfortunate because I was looking forward to hearing the original score from the PS2 game come here into the Nintendo Switch or the newest version of Onimusha. And last but certainly not least is that unfortunately the Gemma Onimusha, the game that was released on the Xbox, unfortunately is not in this version. For those who are not familiar, Gemma Onimusha was sort of a back then an exclusive for the original Xbox. It basically contained, from what I understand, some new areas, some new features, such as doing like a tug of war with some of the souls, and if the enemies won that tug of war and got the souls, they would become more powerful and so forth. And at the time, it was an exclusive for just the Xbox, much like how the original Resident Evil remake of the original Resident Evil was exclusive for the GameCube, along with Resident Evil 0, before that exclusivity ended, and we started to see those games make an appearance on stuff like the PS4, the Xbox One, the PS3, the 360. So I was hoping that they would add Gemma Onimusha into this version. Unfortunately, they did not, and I think that's kind of a disappointment, and I think it's sort of a missed opportunity for Capcom not to add that version of Onimusha in this version, to let people try it out who may have not had an Xbox back in the original Xbox back in the day. So a bit disappointed that Capcom didn't add the Gemma Onimusha game into this remake of Onimusha Warlords. Overall, I still enjoy Onimusha Warlords. And like I said before, it was a fun game when it originally came out back in 2001, and it's still a fun game today. By today's standards, some gamers will view the game as outdated, ranging from the controls and the visuals though. But to me, it's still an enjoyable game, and it's still one I would recommend, especially if you want to see what inspired other games like, say, Noel, Koei Tecmo's, I think it's Noih game, which to me sort of gave off a bit of an Onimusha vibe. I am hoping this game does well enough that basically not only do we get a port of Onimusha 2, Onimusha 3, and Onimusha 4, but I'm hoping it does well enough that it may convince Capcom to perhaps, just perhaps, create a brand new Onimusha game. Maybe have it run on the Resident Evil engine, or run on the Unreal 4 engine. Whatever it is, I would love to see a brand new entry into the Onimusha series. So overall, if you enjoyed the game back then, you'll probably enjoy this one. Probably enjoyed here, unless you don't think it's worth the double dip. If you're new to it though, it's still a fun game, but be advised though, the controls are going to be viewed as outdated, since this game was released around the time when 3D was just getting started and so forth. So compared to where it is, where 3D is the norm. So my rating on Onimusha Warlord, I'm going to give this one, I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5 though. I think the game is, like I said, I think the game is still enjoyable. The gameplay is fun, but I feel as though the original score, unfortunately, not being there is kind of a disappointment. The Gemma Onimusha, I think, is the biggest disappointment, because I think that's the biggest missed opportunity for Capcom, though. The visual and the controls obviously might be outdated for some, but I still think this game holds up well, even in 2019. It was great, like I said, it was great in 2001, and it's still great in 2019. Okay, before I end this video, as I mentioned earlier, I have the Japanese version of Onimusha for the Nintendo Switch. So why do I have this one and not, like, say, an American version? Well, when Capcom announced Onimusha Warlords for the Switch, PS4, and Xbox One, it was later revealed, though, that for the Western audience, if you were picking up the Switch version, the only way you could play that version is buy it digitally through the Nintendo eShop, as Japan had a physical copy, though. So rather than buy it through the eShop, I decided to import the game through PlayAsia, to be exact, and play it on my Nintendo Switch. Now, for those who are not familiar, the Nintendo Switch is region free. Basically, that means that you could play a Japanese version of a game on your US Nintendo Switch, or a European Switch game onto your Nintendo Switch. Now, I popped the game in and played it popped the game in onto my Switch, and it runs well. It runs fine, it plays well, and all that stuff. The only thing I noticed, and maybe I'm missing something, but it seems as though if you're trying to get any My Nintendo points, it's clear you can't get them from, like, if you import a game like that. It's possible because originally this game was only going to be released through the eShop in the West, to be exact. So that's probably the only negativity I could think of. But other than that, Playing the Japanese version on my Nintendo Switch, it ran well. I didn't run into any hiccups or anything like that, at least as far as I'm aware of. So if you're thinking about getting the game and you don't want to go through the Nintendo eShop, you're going to have to look at buying the game, or basically importing the Japanese version through PlayAsia to be exact. It's the same thing with Okami as well. That was released here for the Switch, but only through the Nintendo eShop. And if you wanted a physical copy, you'll have to upload. You have to basically, buy the Japanese version through PlayAsia. So, okay, this concludes my video review of Onimusha Warlords for the Nintendo Switch. And again, these are my opinion. What are yours? What are your thoughts about Onimusha Warlord, especially for the Nintendo Switch? Are you glad Capcom brought this game over to the Nintendo Switch? Do you think the controls and visuals are outdated, or do you think they're just fine? Do you think the game will do well? Would you like to see other entries into the Onimusha series? Like, would you like to see them port Onimusha 2, 3, and 4? Do you think Capcom should start considering creating a brand new entry in the Onimusha series, perhaps using either the Resident Evil engine or maybe like engine like an Unreal Engine 4? Or do you think this series should have been just stayed buried? Do you agree with what I said in this video? Do you disagree? Do you have a difference of opinion? As always, sound off on the comment section below. Let me know what you think, and I hope you hit that like button. I would appreciate it, and I hope you do subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do, make sure you hit the bell icon for notifications of any new videos I do. Also, feel free to share this video if you want to, and feel free to donate to my channel if you like. You can do it through PayPal me or Patreon. Links will be in the description of this video. And I will see you again next time when I do another video. Hopefully that will be soon. Until then, from Southern California, wish you all a good evening then. Bye!